Good evening. My name is Jalen.H, and this is my brief presentation on equity versus equality. Little side note before I start, I wasn't too sure how you wanted the presentation formatted. I was going to do Google Slides, but I saw that you wanted that in weeks 2 to 7, so I thought I'd just put my information on a document and kind of give the information with the questions as I could. So, obviously, based on the readings for this week, the conversation was on equity versus equality. So, what I did is I sat there, I did my research based on what was provided, and I split them into two different sensible things that could kind of make sense to the common reader. We'll start with equality on the left here. So, I felt like it prioritizes a standard approach that will connect to all students in education, such as learning resources, assessments, and more. There's the basis that each student will equally start at the same place no matter the differences, previous knowledge or unfamiliarity. That's kind of why most students on like the first day of school going into a new grade, no matter what they knew before that previous year, most educators are going to start them on the same kind of level and just go from there instead of pulling each student based on what they know and sectioning them out. Structured around giving each student similar access to curriculum, learning resources, and ideas. And my last point for equality is that it is easier to implement for a general community, but may have some difficulties catering to students with diverse needs or diverse classroom needs. This might be one of the reasons why implementing similar things for students in a gen ed class compared to something like an autism class is just unrealistic because these students kind of need different supports. Hence why the diverse aspect, while it's probably well regarded, it's not something that can always be practical. When I get to equity is a little bit different. Equity is kind of the base idea that the resources that these students are getting is provided around their individual success instead of what pleases everyone. It's what makes one individual at a time grow. So my first highlight from there is that students receive their specific resources based on their individual needs. The recognition that students may start differentiates because they face different challenges. There's the idea that fairness revolves around providing resources that give individual growth, and the key focus is on outcomes and prosperity rather than identical growth amongst all peers. It's the idea that an individual should grow based on what they need instead of at the pace of a classroom, especially in an educational setting. It just doesn't seem unrealistic, but it can definitely slow a person down, which is why it's okay to have a good mix of equality and equity in the classroom. I took some specific examples from the readings from this week. In the world beyond school, we don't have to be good at everything. We have specific skills that match the needs of a specific job, and we have plenty of adult experience and maturity. This is from page 6 of the differentiate section. I feel like this was a great example of equity because it shows that we're kind of in this push in education to be on the same page when realistically we're not all going to be on the same page. We're not going to all be good at the same things. That's why there's so many opportunities and occupations around the world because individuals are going to find something that gives them stride. They're going to find something that they're good in compared to others and vice versa, and it's going to be something that works for them because we have this approach where we're all together in the classroom setting. But at the end of the day, when students graduate, they're going to be on their own in the real world trying to find what works for them. In terms of equality, the quote I took was only give the fully written description for the standard of excellence. This way students won't set their sights on something lower. I feel like it was a good example of equality from the readings because it kind of says, hey, let's not sit there and overcomplicate this. We're going to sit there and give our students what they need straightforward and we're going to keep it going. It's kind of accommodating to maybe what students want to hear, keeping things simple instead of providing that diverse and individual need and just being straightforward. Also had two real world examples that were requested in in the directions for this week. So my real world example one, I thought this related to world of California. I live in California. California's public high school system prioritizes the college and career readiness pushed by structuring the curriculum to align with the A through G requirements for UC CSU systems. I think anyone watching this who's went to a public high school in California knows that there was a huge push on the A through G requirements that gives you things like math, music, science, etc., because it aligns with what students need to successfully or hopefully successfully get in and succeed in a UC/CSU system for public four-year universities. It represents equality great because it gives most of these students the same kind of resources in hopes that they'll get to this next level of college, but it doesn't highlight equity too well because it's not giving that same kind of support for students who may not want that route, who may want to go straight to the armed forces or go to a trade or even jump to community college. The A through G requirements are big on what's needed for universities, but it's not too accommodating to what students may need if they're not taking that direction. My second real world example is despite the absolute magnitude of different capabilities regarding academic knowledge and understanding, each public school will receive the same opportunity to do the same SAT test for admission purposes. So going back again to the public school setting system, a lot of students receive the opportunity to do the SAT. The thing about these tests usually is that they're not differentiated. Students might get different versions of it, but no matter what a student's knowledge is or how familiar or unfamiliar they are with the material, they're all going to get the same test and opportunity. This is where the idea of equality comes in because they're all receiving the same chance to display what they know for these admissions. And the final question that I had was, why do you think it is important that all kids have access to technology in order to bridge the equality gap, the equity gap in education? I summarized it quick. It is important that each student has access to technology because it makes progress in truly eliminating that gap that comes from lack of equal accessibility. I think it goes without saying that students who are in a tier one, lower end, poverty-stricken school district might not have the same test scores or same progress as those students who are doing just fine, coming from school districts that have community support and financial support and two-parent households and households that have financial stability. It makes it a bit more difficult for these students who have these odds against them to sit there and succeed. So giving them this technology that gives the access to resources and things that they may need for the future, things that pertain to them particularly for their growth in the moment or their growth for the future, is monumental, and it creates great magnitudes. It helps them a ton. Last but not least, I just listed references. Besides the reading from this week, I also took Bridging the Digital Divide in Our Schools. It's just a online document that expresses why that technology access should be similar for all students. Thank you.